Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for participating. I hope you find it thought-provoking and helpful. Um, Dr. Eli Shapiro is a very dear friend. He's done remarkable work in many areas. What I found, the two that I find most interesting is this digital citizenship, which is basically teaching your children how to be citizens of this digital world. Excuse Dr. Eli, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. It's sort of like getting a license to drive a car. Is that a fair analogy?
It's a process, but the rules also apply to adults as well. So it's not just about kids. We do a lot of workforce well-being and productivity and consulting in the digital age and how technology is impacting the workforce as well. But certainly we want to start them young in that process.
Yeah, but I guess I'm an educator, so I hear it's from the children's side. And it's really a wonderful program. And the other work that Dr. Shapiro has done that I am familiar with is the research on internet use from kids. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later. Dr. Eli Shapiro is a licensed clinical social worker with a doctorate in education and specialist certificate in Jewish educational leadership. As I said, he's the creator of the Digital Citizenship Project and is an adjunct professor for City University of New York. Welcome, Dr. Eli, and thank you very much for participating again. We're talking about COVID and its relationship on families. I know that's something you've always studied. Tell me a little bit about what you found and how you see families transitioning back to life eventually when the new normal kicks in.
So yeah, Dr. David Fox wrote a great article, The New Abnormal, as opposed to the new normal. I don't know if we're ever going to get right back to normal. I think there's a lot happening for a lot of people, and this really was thrown upon us in such an unusual way. All of a sudden, a lot of the values that we expressed concern about, whether it was technology or overall functioning in households, all of a sudden we find ourselves with a new dynamic, embracing technology in a way that we never have before. Family proximity with one another in a way that we never expected. It's a lot of what we talk about with technology and functioning overall is about balance, and all of a sudden everything's unbalanced. The degree to which we're with our families and the degree to which we're engaging with technology, it's unbalanced. And so finding the positivity and finding the opportunities within this state of imbalance is what we want to focus on, and it's what I'm seeing with families that I speak to and with kids that I work with. And with schools as well, principals, teachers, everybody's concerned about how this new way of functioning is impacting and affecting our overall well-being. And the term that I use a lot is functioning and flourishing, because we don't just have to get by and get through situations like this. We actually can flourish in environments like this, and it actually presents many opportunities as well as challenges. So,
example.
So for example, I can just say for the last month, I've had the opportunity to daven 3 times a day with my son, make him breakfast in the morning. We don't have the usual stress of getting out of bed by 6:30. It creates these sort of opportunities, in the middle of the day, finding that we're having lunch together on the back porch. These are opportunities if we choose to take advantage of them. My kids are developing independent skills. My 2 older daughters know that they have to do their laundry if they want laundry. The cleaning lady's not coming. So they've learned certain degrees of responsibility in that area. Executive functioning opportunities, creating a schedule, sticking to the schedule. Even the basics of, with Zoom school and distance learning, logging on, your passwords, keeping them in order. These are all skills that kids are now having an opportunity to develop that they just didn't have that opportunity prior to that. Just getting through the day, getting through the week, was a stress, and making that happen. And that's not to minimize the stress that comes along with this, but we do have an opportunity to step back a little bit, and if we are strategic and thoughtful and deliberative with how we approach managing COVID, then it really does, in my view, present opportunities.
They say in the business world, don't waste a good crisis, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's about using this opportunity for in terms of family, in terms of responsibility, for what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, for example, just today, my wife and I realized we needed to buy some things at Costco. So we went at 2 o'clock to Costco after we had done our Zoom meetings and our Zoom classes, and then we went and that never happens. Just a leisurely Wednesday afternoon walk through Costco, that just doesn't happen. So these opportunities are there if we choose to see them that way. We can choose to accept the discomfort and all the negative that comes along with it, the expectations we had for our daily routine, or the expectations that we had for what the day-to-day or the week-to-week might look like in quote-unquote normal terms, pre-COVID terms, or we can choose to view it in a way that's positive and view the opportunities within that.
So tell me, let's talk a bit about technology, what it looks like now that, just as you said, we try to find a balance before in technology use, and now everybody's using it off the charts to communicate, like the two of us are, right?
Yeah.
So what are you finding? And perhaps before you do that, maybe explain a little bit more about the digital citizenship. I think, like I told you, I was intrigued when I heard about it the first time. So maybe share with our audience what it's all about, and then we'll talk about how it relates here. Please.
Sure. So my background, as you mentioned, I'm a clinical social worker, a school social worker. My doctorate's in education, and my focus has always been on social emotional literacy, social emotional functioning in kids and families. I ended up working in schools just because that's where it seemed like the kids were. So if I wanted to work with families and kids, it seemed that schools were the place to be. I didn't particularly like schools as a kid, so going back to them as a professional wasn't on my radar. It wasn't what I was particularly looking for, but that's just how it played out. So in looking at the social emotional aspects, or what we call the affective domain of education, the non-cognitive, the non-academic, the experiential, which I believe in the last 20 years, there's been a big shift towards that. When I was a kid growing up, there were no school social workers. That concept didn't exist. But today we understand that the affective domain, the emotional experience, the happiness of kids in school is part and parcel with their success in school. So there's been a shift, but that's always been my focus. And I guess early on, bullying was an issue, still is an issue. And that was one of my areas of focus, understanding pro-social behaviors in school, positive peer interactions, how to promote that, how to create an environment, a social environment within school that was exciting for kids, that they were happy. And the flip side of that was bullying, which created a negative social environment. Kids were scared to go to school, physically having symptoms, not wanting to go to school. They were scared, and I wanted to focus on that. So earlier in my career, and I was working on that, and then moving towards my doctorate, the sort of natural progression of areas I was looking at, going back into 2008, 9, around then, was cyberbullying. 2007, the iPhone came out. Social media started gathering steam, so it was a new field. Cyberbullying was a relatively new issue. It didn't appear in any of the literature, the research, until 2007. So this was only a year or two after the word cyberbullying were just starting to come out, and I was interested in that. And in my research on cyberbullying, I was discovering how technology was impacting functioning overall. So cyberbullying was one component of it, but we were starting to see, and if you recall, at this time, 2007, 2008, 2009, the main conversation around technology was the content. The internet, the content, problematic. That was where the communal dialogue was. And here, in my research, in my studying, and in published research that was starting to emerge, it was so much more than that. It was content, but it was social functioning, psychological impact, behavioral impact, day-to-day impact. And that was all coming out of the cyberbullying piece that I was studying. And it just opened a whole world to me of where technology and human functioning were intersecting, and all the challenging, problematic issues that were coming out of it. So in the social realm, we were seeing miscommunication, cyberbullying, social dependence, texting addiction, which is different than other than that compulsion, the need to text and communicate with people through the digital realm. Psychologically, we were seeing elevated anxiety, depression. Behaviorally, we were seeing impulsivity, compulsivity, online disinhibition, all these areas surrounding technology that wasn't really being discussed. I think it was probably in 2012 or 13, someone approached me about doing an internet safety speech. And I was like tired of hearing about internet safety.
Put on a filter, right?
Yeah, put on a filter, and not to minimize filters. Everyone should have.
Right, of course.
Yeah, but to me,
it's not only that.
It's
right.
The example I always give is that a filter is like a seatbelt in a car. You gotta wear a seatbelt. It's safety. It's preventive, but it doesn't teach you how to drive responsibly. And my goal, and the reason was I got to help people drive responsibly. So I was asked to do another internet safety speech, and I said no. I said it's not about internet safety. It's about digital citizenship. I'm like, digital what? Obama was president at the time. People thought it was some mechanism to become a U.S. citizen through the internet. It was like, no one's confused that under the Trump administration. I don't get any calls about that. But this idea, so the person that approached me said, well, do you know of any digital citizenship programming? And I said, no, not really, I don't. But it should be done. Someone should do it. And they sort of challenged me to develop something. So I said, okay, fine. So
someone.
What?
You became the someone.
I became the someone, and I developed a curriculum along with Tamima Feldman, who's a school administrator, a principal at Torah Academy for Girls in Far Rockaway. And we developed this curriculum and called the Digital Citizenship Project in 2014. And we started doing, parent programs and faculty professional development and this curriculum and doing a train-the-trainer model. But the whole idea was to teach digital responsibility in the age of technology. That was the goal, digital responsibility. And the mechanism to do that was to help people identify and understand how technology was impacting their functioning. And this wasn't about technology addiction. Let's just put that on the side. The 5% of people, maybe less, out there that can't manage their technology and just are glued to screens and can't separate. I mean, right now in the mental health world, there really is no DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual for mental health, the field of mental health, does not have an addiction called technology addiction. It doesn't exist. So what we do is we sort of look at, let's say, substance abuse and substance dependence, which we call addiction. And one of the areas we look at is the failure to fulfill primary role obligation. So when anything is interfering with your ability to fulfill your primary role obligation, we could use the colloquial term addiction. So technology addiction, when people are utilized, that's rare. It's rare that you have someone who is 35, living in their parents' basement and playing video games and failing to thrive in a functioning way. However, 95% of us experience consequences of technology engagement, whether it's elevated anxiety or lower levels of subjective well-being, just being less happy, whether it's impulsivity or compulsivity. All these areas impact all of us. So the question is, how can we maximize what technology has to offer, where it serves as an enhancement in our lives rather than an intrusion? And that's a question every single one of us has to ask ourselves every day. Is technology serving as an enhancement in our lives, or is it serving as an intrusion? And some days it's going to be more of an intrusion, and some days it's going to be more of an enhancement. But if we have a fundamental understanding how technology is impacting our functioning, and we can talk about that, then we can make more strategic, informed, thoughtful, and deliberative decisions around technology. So if we know that technology is serving as a distraction with our family members, we might say, in my own house, we do something called going dark for dinner. During dinner time, we strategically and deliberately put our phones away to ensure that the quality of the interactions are positive, and we can talk and not be distracted by the devices. If we know that, when we're in meetings, so the research is very clear that the mere presence of your phone on your desk reduces your cognitive functioning. You cannot think as well just by having your phone on your desk. And we all know that. If we put our phone away, put it in a drawer, we're much better off from a focus standpoint in that moment. It's interesting, I was reading the book about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Are you putting your phone away, Yankee?
No, I'm
Okay.
actually, I actually just mentioned at last night's talk, Rabbi Avi Shulman, who lives around the corner here.
Yeah.
He always says that if you go to a speech without a pen, I guess dating ourselves again, it's like going to a smorgasbord without a fork in your hand, so, and he always says, go walk away with one or two pieces of advice from anytime you hear someone speak. So far mine is put my phone on my desk.
So it really makes a difference.
Really
There's a lot of research behind it. They've done numerous studies, just standardized tests. They've had kids take it with their phone on their desk and the phone in their knapsack. They didn't touch the phone. The screen was down. They couldn't see whether they were getting messages. Just the presence served as a distraction. And so I was reading.
The logic behind it is that you're distracted between looking at what you're doing and the phone.
Just the fact that it's there. You don't have to touch it. You don't have to see the screen. It doesn't have to buzz. It doesn't have to ding. Just its presence serves as a distraction. So, I would say that during Shacharis, when I'm wearing Talis and Tefillin, I don't have my phone. I don't even have it in my pocket. Even if it's in your pocket, it's different than if I keep it back in my locker. It's not because I'm like such a frum guy or anything. It seems that it just doesn't go together. The good news is my Shacharis is down to 6.5 minutes. I've figured that part out. But the truth is, I was reading the Rebbe by Tolushkin about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I forget which page it's on, but a woman came in to meet with him and wanted to record it on a tape recorder. This is in the late 1950s. And she asks the Lubavitcher Rebbe, hey, can I record on this tape? And he said, no, I don't want you to, because the tape recorder will serve as a distraction. He says you'll be worrying about the gears, whether there's enough tape, is it recording, is it not recording, and you're not going to be in the moment, you're not going to be focused. So even in the 1950s, technology, was serving as a distraction, and even more so today. And we have compulsions. When you think about how frequently you check your device, right? How often, and everyone should just do this on a daily basis, count, how often are you checking it in response to a notification? Or are you checking it because there's a dead second somewhere in your day that you just grab it and check, right? So the latter is a compulsion. There's no reason you're checking your phone other than the fact that it's there. But that serves as a distraction. That serves as a behavioral compulsion that interferes with your function. So then we ask the question, is it serving as an enhancement or is it serving as an intrusion? I would say in those cases, it's serving as an intrusion. Now, double down on that, you're in the middle of talking to someone, and you don't get a notification. You get a notification, maybe it's rude, maybe it's important, I don't know. But you're no notification, and you pull your phone out and you start looking. What kind of message is that? What does it send? So all these areas, nothing to do with content. It's just how we interact, how we live our lives. I did a workshop in a business not too long ago, different divisions of a larger business on technology and organizational culture and use of technology. Someone came over to me afterwards and he said, I really feel like I'm addicted to my phone. I can't manage. So I asked him, well, what happens when you wake up in the morning? What's the first thing you do in the morning? He goes, I check my phone. So my advice to him was, first thing to do, go to the bathroom, wash an Eggelwasser, then check your phone. You're delaying the phone by 30 seconds, 45 seconds, maybe a minute at most, right? So from a pragmatic functional standpoint, it's really irrelevant. You pushed it off, but you've taken control. You're the one in control now. It's not the compulsion that you check the phone just because it's there. It's you delay it. Another suggestion that I gave to this individual was to put a rubber band around his phone. So this way, when he reaches into his pocket as the compulsion piece, he'll feel the rubber band. It'll remind him that I'm just checking the phone because of a habit, because of compulsion, and then he'll stop. So little techniques like that can shift the phone from being is something that interferes with the day. Technology is awesome. Technology is amazing. It can enhance our lives in so many wonderful ways. But if we sort of blindly go through our technology use and just not think about it, then it becomes, the impact can be more negative than positive. So these are the things we think about.
And what were the major outcomes of that study that you did with the yeshiva, with the boys and girls? You did middle school, I believe, and high school.
So we've it's ongoing. I'm always serving school. I've been fortunate since we started the Digital Citizenship Project to have worked with over 200 schools and organizations across the globe. And I very much like to collect data from schools because it helps inform my work. In social work, we talk about doing an assessment before the intervention. So instead of walking into a school and saying, this is what you should do, I try to get information. So I collect data, and we probably have close to 4,000, maybe over 4,000 student surveys, around the same amount of parent surveys, just on a whole bunch of issues around technology. Ownership rates, usage habits, other behaviors with technology. Probably one of the most concerning numbers that I've seen is that close to 80% of kids sleep with their devices within reach. That's probably the most concerning, primarily because when you think about impact on overall functioning for kids, the greatest predictor of whether a child will be successful in school on any given day, and this is pre-COVID, but their ability to be successful in school on any given day, both socially and academically, has to do with the quality of sleep they had the night before. They had a good night's sleep, they're ready to face the day. And as someone in education, you can tell right away when a child walks into school, if they didn't get a good night's sleep, you can see it, right? So, and they just can't function. They can't tolerate stress or distress or adversity or any challenges. They just don't have it in them. As adults, we don't get a good night's sleep. It's hard.
And the phone, you say the phones is practically assuring or certainly heightening the likelihood that
it is very significantly contributing to poor sleep. The kids themselves, almost 80% of kids say that they stay up late as a result of their technology. And again, we're not talking about content. We're talking about schmoozing with friends. We're talking about their grade chat, their camp chat, worrying about, there's something called FOMO, fear of missing out. They're worried about missing on something important in a chat, and that's part of it. And then also you have the research on screens before bedtime. It impacts melatonin production in the brain. It makes it more difficult to fall asleep. The quality of the sleep is diminished. Harvard University did a study where they compared reading a book at bedtime and reading an e-reader at bedtime. So this isn't even, not
even surfing the internet.
Right, not even surfing the internet. This is like reading the same content, book versus e-reader. And you don't have to have gone to Harvard to figure this out, although maybe you did, I don't know. But
this is the principal's program.
Okay, so okay.
I was able to get a sweatshirt.
Most of the people I've met who've gone to that principal, the AOL principal's program, they may have done 20 years of graduate school, but everything they ever learned goes back to those 2 weeks in Harvard. It's like, when I was in Harvard, I learned,
I don't drop that often.
Yeah. It's okay, you're entitled. You've done it. So, but that when you read a book at bedtime, what happens? You fall asleep. And so that's what Harvard found. In fact, I have a book on my nightstand I've been reading for the last 8 months. I'm still on page 2. And I like to say I'm not on page 2 after 8 months because I learned in Chavetz Chaim. That's not it. What happens is I pick up the book and I fall asleep. But what they found was that when people read from an e-reader, they actually had a more difficult time falling asleep, and the quality of their sleep was diminished. So that's even just reading. So then if you want to add into the equation, watching Netflix, binging on Netflix till 3, 4 a.m., right? Or social media. I actually, I sort of categorize screen time differently than most people. Generally, you hear the term screen time, you think of it as one big screen time, whatever it is. It's just the mere being in front of a screen. But I think
about the 4 different kinds of internet use.
Yeah, so you have your basic, I'll mention these in my view, least productive to most productive. But least productive is consumption. That's Netflix or YouTube or whatever streaming service, Disney Plus. Whatever one might be using. Now, consumption is not all bad. It's okay to decompress and watch something and relax, and it's fine, but it's a very basic type of use. And when you're 4 or 5 episodes into something and it's 3 in the morning, so we can say that the benefit of the decompression and relaxation is probably past, and now you've moved on to problematic behavior. Then you have the type of screen time that is like it's interactive, like video games. I would call it complementary. So it's like a video game. You're doing something happens. There's some strategy involved. You're thinking, step 1, step 2, what's the next step? Visual motor integration. There's some benefit to that. So that's like the next level. Then you have communication, which, social media, connecting with friends, with family, sharing thoughts, commenting on things. That's another level of technology interaction. And then you have creative. Creative is what we're doing now with distance learning. It's schoolwork, it's coding, it's graphic design. It's doing something that is actually elevating yourself. So it's an elevated process. But again, too much of that is also problematic. So, but it's sort of the best of the screen time. So we want to think about screen time in a more sophisticated way than just screen time, and looking at how we utilize screens. And screens are part of our lives. It's, we use it to function in many different ways. Some people's jobs are on screens, again, we want to find balance in that. And we've been thrown into a situation where there is less balance and a significant increase of technology use. But overall, we want to be a little more sophisticated with how we approach our conversations around screen time.
And how this survey that you did recently, once COVID, not post-COVID, but in the middle of COVID, what did you find out? One of the things you said was actually, I would not have guessed.
I wouldn't have guessed it either. What we did was, in the first few weeks of COVID, because again, my background has been, screen time in general is not ideal, and here we are throwing our kids, even though it's creative, and it's not exactly like sitting and watching YouTube all day, but it is creative, so it's better. But it's certainly it's a shift. It's a new, I'll give you an example. 89% of people, although it's becoming less and less, in 2014 experienced phantom vibrations. Phantom vibrations is when your body is buzzing but your phone's not around. It's like just one of those things on Shabbos, you start doing this because you feel
like for someone to get something amputated, they feel
right. It's called like a phantom. Right. So the question is, 89% of people experience is, why is that happening? It's because we've brought technology into our lives at such a fast rate. In a way, our bodies literally have been conditioned that they don't know where the body ends and the technology begins. That's really what's happening when we experience those phantom vibrations. So similarly, my concern was that we were jumping from, let's say, your average kid's screen time might have been 2-3 hours a day. All of a sudden, it's 12 hours a day, right? So we're jumping into something very quickly. So I was concerned about that. So I sent out surveys to parents, communities, New York, New Jersey, Phoenix. I'm trying to remember all the cities, Seattle, Indianapolis, a handful of cities, Pittsburgh, across the US. And we got about 1,500 or so parent responses about distance learning, synchronous versus asynchronous. That's the regular real-time face-to-face with the teachers versus online assignments. And looking at by grade, by gender, how much time was being spent on the screens. But most importantly, I was looking at what might the consequences be as a result of screen time? What kind of symptoms might kids be reporting as a result of being in front of screens? So we had given them a handful of options, including headache, nausea, backache, eye fatigue, general fatigue, stress, it was eye strain, fatigue. So a whole bunch of
caused by the
yeah. We asked what
value of
I think the question was, please select all the symptoms that your child complains about as a result of screen time. I think that the wording of the question was something along those lines. And look, we're Jews. We like to fetch. Given the opportunity to complain about stuff, we'll check most of the boxes. That's what I would have assumed. That would have been my hypothesis. But as it turns out, close to 60% of kids were experiencing no symptoms, which I was surprised by. And then the two,
I was surprised when you shared it with me.
Yeah, but the two highest, two of the three of the highest consequences were fatigue and stress, which really can be explained by, the fact that everybody's stressed and fatigued. I remember the first few weeks of the whole COVID quarantine and isolation, stay at home. I was stressed. I wasn't sleeping well. I was, with a lot of unknown. It would be interesting now, though, to do the survey again. So the survey, we completed it a little over a month ago.
Now that people are out more?
Now that people, I'm seeing anecdotally, kids being zoomed out. They're just done. And I don't have hard data on it, but I hear from teachers. I participate in lots of faculty meetings in schools, and the teachers are just reporting that the kids are, the term they're using is zoomed out. I see it, and I wonder if I did the survey again now, if I would get a higher rate of those symptoms.
Kelly, I just want to throw out, not related to technology, but when parents call me and they say, or email, Rabbi Horowitz, my kid is asking to go, just fill in the blank, right? To a movie, to this pizza shop or whatever, pre-COVID, thinking of going out with some friends late at night, 11 o'clock. My standard response is, you didn't finish the question. And if I say no, right, should I say yes or no? I said, that's not the question. You have to tell me what's going to happen if you don't let them go. What are they going to do? How's it going to affect your relationship? And also, what else are you providing them with? But I think part of this technology piece, perhaps the reason that it did not show up such negative, but what would be for many or most kids, what else are they, I don't mean there's nothing else to do, but when you compare it to sitting around or getting into, fights with your little sister or other things like that, one could make the case, especially if it's educational, that you're actually, it's a step in the right direction when they're engaged with something.
Yeah, so I always advise parents, we always have to assess the consequences of action versus the consequences of inaction. I get questions all the time about, well, most of the kids in my child's class have smartphones, but I won't give my child a smartphone. People ask smartphone ownership is very much a socially driven experience. When kids, and I see it in, let's say, in 8th grade in a school that has, let's say, 6 parallel classes, and you have diversity, probably not within the classes, but within the grade. So you have a certain group of classes that are one way, and then you'll have in one 8th grade, everyone has a smartphone, in one 8th grade class, and another 8th grade class, no one has a smartphone. Why is that? Because the social norms sort of dictate what is it. So a parent will say that, all the kids in my child's class have a smartphone. I'm not getting my child a smartphone. Okay. It's like as if I get a commission if they get to get a smartphone.
Right.
So I tell them I don't get a commission. So I always recommend that, if the child is expressing it and they're feeling really strong about it and they're really stressed out and I understand there are consequences of getting them the device, but there are also consequences of not getting them the device. And so as a parent, you have to make that decision. And it's not limited to technology. It's everyone in my class is getting driver's license. Everyone in my class is, is going on this trip. Everyone in my class is getting engaged. You know, whatever it might be that's driving it, you know, you always as a parent have to discuss the consequence of action versus inaction. Technology is one area that plays out. And you have to look at the whole picture. Some kids, they can be the last kid in the class to get a smartphone, and it doesn't bother them, and they're socially adjusted, and they're happy, and they don't feel the need or they don't want. And other kids, you know, they feel that need. So I don't have a cookie cutter answer. Yes, your kid. No, your kid. It depends on a whole lot of variables, including.
So I actually try, Dr. Eli, when I do classes on raising adolescents, which I'm doing now, you know, on alternate nights, and we're doing a thing on technology next week. I do mention this thing about the factors, you know, about there are many different factors. What I try to make it a little more concrete is I say to analyze your child. At what point are they going to do it behind your back? How many no's are you going to say before they just get fed up and they say, listen, I'll risk it? As we used to say, it's an easier task to mechila than to get rishus, you know? So when the kids, you know, it's easy to ask for forgiveness than to get permission. So that's usually what I'll use as a rule of thumb. You tell them if you feel that your child is, when they're expressing this frustration to you, they may have already bought a phone, you know, behind your back. And if they're ready to do that, then it's time to have it in front of them.
So my recommendation generally is that if the social norm is to do something, then, you know, it's kind of unfair to not allow your kid to do that. So did you pick the wrong school, or that's a possibility, you know, but
you chose to live here. And
right. You know, I often say that I genuinely believe that we would all be better off socially, psychologically, behaviorally, spiritually, if we all lived on farms in Montana with no technology. Like, we'd all be better, but for the vast majority of us, unless you're a Chabad Shliach, it just doesn't work. So you can't live on a farm in Montana. And so if you've chosen to raise your kids in the 5 towns, or if you've chosen to, then there are benefits to that and there are consequences to that. And if you feel that strongly about it, that's okay. As a parent, you have the right to say no, even though everybody else is getting it. Mm-hmm. But recognize that there are going to be consequences as a result of the inaction. So I was speaking to a Rav a number of years ago, and I told him this, and he disagreed. He felt that, you know, I have my shitas, and I'm going to stick with them, and I don't care what's going on in my son's class. He's not getting a smartphone. Again, I get home, I don't get a commission, you know, enjoy. He came back to me 2 years later and he said, you know, Dr. Eli, you were right. Because I was so strict on this issue when the social norm was different, he went out, he bought a device behind my back, and for 6 months I had no idea. There were no controls, there was no oversight, there was no filters, there was nothing. No conversations, because I said. So now every child is going to be different. Some are going to do that, some are not going to do that. But as a parent, you know your child's best. I mean, people come to me and they ask me, I don't know your child. You know, I don't know what they will do, what they won't do. But I try to guide parents to make the best decision based on their understanding of their child and the social norms, social situation, you know, and what's right for you know, an 8th grader living in the 5 towns is going to be different for an 8th grader living in Muncie, and certainly different for an 8th grader living in Lakewood. There's no one right answer, and that's why I get very nervous when I hear categorical statements around technology that this is the shita, you know this or know that, or yes this or yes that. It's, you know, people have, what's the right age to get your child a smartphone? I would much rather give a 12-year-old a smartphone with limits and conversation and education and oversight and communication than I would to just give an 18-year-old or a 19 or a 20-year-old a smartphone without anything. Just here you go.
And you know, something I started doing a number of years ago is I encourage parents to sit down and make the rules for internet use should be a collaborative process where let's say the parents communicate. So look, here are my concerns. These 5 things. Solve them. What do you know? I'm worried that you're not going to do your homework. You're going to become weird. You're going to do inappropriate stuff, you get cyberbullied, write solutions for them, and then we'll talk about it. So you bring them into the process.
So what I did with my daughter, who's now 20, I know what you're thinking, how can a guy so young have such an old daughter? I know you're wondering, right? It's moisturizer, it's right under the eyes like that. It keeps you bright and vibrant. But when she was, I started hearing when she was 12, everybody has a smartphone, or 13, everyone has a smartphone. By the time she was 15, everyone really did have a smartphone. It was her and another girl in her class who I made a pact with her father that we're not getting our kids smartphones. So it was the two of them. And basically I realized that there were social consequences for not having a smartphone at this point. And so I sat her down, I set up my computer and PowerPoint projector and presentation. And I made her sit through the 3-hour version of my lecture. It was interesting. It was amazing that she was able to pay attention. Her eyes were rolled so far back in her head that I didn't think she was seeing anything. But after explaining, my concerns, social, psychological, behavioral, everything we just talked about, impulsivity, compulsivity, disinhibition, all these issues, I said, come up with rules that you think would be appropriate that will address my concerns. These are my concerns. You come up with the rules. So she came up with the first draft of the contract. I reviewed it with my people. We made some revisions, sent it back to her people, which is pretty much her and her friends who were actually very sympathetic to the fact that I was her father, when all her friends, the parents just gave them the iPhone. So, we went through this process till we finally came up with a contract that worked. And there were like 20 rules in the contract. And I often get the question like, do you really think she followed all the rules? That's the thing. And the answer is, of course she didn't. She's a teenager.
Right.
Teenagers aren't supposed to follow. They push limits, they test boundaries. It's part of their identity formation. But at least she knows what the rules are. She knows what the expectations are. The values are inculcated. And now when she breaks the rules, it's a cognitive process. It's like, I'm going to take the risk. And, it's the challenge of parenting and teenagers. And the most important thing is that they know what the expectations are. If the kids don't know what the expectations are, then it's Hefker. But as long as they know what the expectations are, they're not going to follow every rule. And there are built-in consequences and things like that. But, it's that dynamic and that approach in parenting, not just with technology, but across the board, having kids know what the expectations are and inculcating those expectations into the kids.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, Dr. Eli, but what do you see education changing forever, I guess, as they say, when we get back in a year or two from now?
So it's interesting. It's a good question. Education was changing prior to COVID.
Right.
There was more of a shift towards utilizing data and assessment. Let's say in the 80s, how do you know if a kid really knew anything? Or how did, if he did well on a test, didn't do well on a test? Were all fifth graders across the country learning the same Chumash and same? We didn't really know. But in Limudei Kodesh and Limudei Chol, we have opportunities at technology, and that was already being introduced. There were some school communities that were pushing back on device ownership, but all of a sudden we find, I would estimate that probably around 20 to 25,000 kids that did not have devices prior to COVID now are utilizing devices that they didn't have before, not just the ones that are logging in, but new devices. And this is traditionally in communities that have pushed back against device ownership and usage. So there's been a massive shift in a very short period of time. And I think that, in the same way that we can view COVID in a negative fashion, we can view this as a negative, that all of a sudden we have technology that we didn't want. But we also can look at it in a positive way. We can see what opportunities that they might present. With that said, I think that we have learned, teachers have all of a sudden developed skills that they never had before. Unwanted, maybe, but all of a sudden they've expanded their horizons. A school administrator in New Jersey said this year, every teacher was a first-year teacher. And there's so much truth to that, where, you could have chosen when this started to say, have a fixed mindset. Carol Dweck talks about fixed mindset and growth mindset. Could have had a fixed mindset and said, I don't do distance learning, digital learning, Zoom learning, whatever you want to put in it. Or you can say, here's an opportunity for me to expand my repertoire, develop skills, and become good at something. And those that were committed to their craft found this opportunity. So education was already shifting. There were models of education, flipped learning, where students would look at material, video presentation of the teacher the night before, so that when they came to school the next day, they would be able to have a more in-depth conversation. So they weren't teaching the base material. It was really focusing on critical thinking skills, giving kids those opportunities. So there were schools already doing this. I think that more schools are going to take advantage of technology now, and schools that would not have been doing that prior to COVID, but realize that there are opportunities. I think we're here in the Northeast. I think snow days are a thing of the past. I think
you know, and when children get sick for a week, I'm sure they're going to start setting up, you know, by Zoom. I think even in our own adult lives.
Yeah.
I had two Zoom doctor appointments.
Yeah.
And, you know, you go for an initial visit, they don't really need to see, you know, when it's not an examination. I think a lot of these things are just going to change for good. I can't imagine that everything's just going to go back the way it was.
Yeah, but hopefully, you know, we want to add these opportunities as an enhancement. You know, that's always the question, enhancement or intrusion. And we need to recognize that there are times that the technology serves as an intrusion, but there are also, if we are, again, like we opened with, if we're strategic about it, presents real opportunities educationally, functionally, in the business world. Businesses that had a culture of nobody works from home, you know, there are businesses that have that culture, all of a sudden realize, like, wow, you know, Joe's been a lot more productive lately since he's been working from home.
And if you don't have a 2.5-hour commute round trip,
Right.
Same thing, right? What I'm hearing from you very clearly is that parents and adults should focus on opportunities of what the COVID situation allows us to do in terms of our own growth and in terms of our families and you know, trying to develop more meaningful relationships.
We always have a choice in any situation we face that we can view it positively or negatively. And we all sometimes view it negatively and sometimes view it positively. But if we make the effort to view it positively, that's what the impact is going to be. Viktor Frankl says in Man's Search for Meaning that between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space is our power to choose. So we can choose how we perceive things. You know, all the cognitive behavioral psychologists, you know, talk about how the way we think about something is the way we're going to feel about it. Was it that Tzemach Tzedek said, "Tracht gut wird dein gut"? Yeah, so my Yiddish isn't my first language. I don't know if you noticed that. But basically, think good and it'll be good. I mean, he was a cognitive behavioral psychologist, you know,
before his
time. So yeah, I mean, I view, look, there's a lot of things that COVID has interfered with, you know, for all of us, individually, myself, many things, and I can choose to, you know, a very simple example is I can prefer vanilla ice cream, right? I prefer vanilla ice cream, and I can invest myself in liking vanilla ice cream. But if chocolate shows up, I can either say, all right, chocolate's not bad either, or I can say, no, I prefer vanilla ice cream. So I have a choice. There are plenty of things in I don't mean to oversimplify it, but, you know, it's just what it is. Many things that happen, you know, that it's not what I would have preferred, but I can focus on aspects of it that are enhancements and that are enriching. I think I mentioned a few of them earlier. You know,
I think that's a really good positive message. Dr. Eli, I thank you so very much for your time. Keep up your great work. I have nachas watching the work you're doing, especially in the field of technology. I think you're filling a tremendous need. Shirat mazel and bracha. Again, thank you very much, and everybody, thank you for participating. I hope you found it helpful. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much, Dr. Eli.
Right.
Good night.